Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to attend this ESC Compliance Fundamentals webinar. It looks like we've had a great amount of interest, which is awesome to see. Just a few things before we get started. So the session will definitely be recorded and uploaded to our website. So don't stress if you need to leave early or if you have colleagues who'd like to catch up at a later time. We'll alert you once that's been uploaded. If everyone could mute their microphones, and also we usually love to have cameras on, but for such a large webinar, we'll just get cameras off for this session, just to help things run a bit more smoothly. I have Natalie Taylor. She's our one of our coordinators here for events. So she'll be in the background helping out. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, you can put them in the chat and we can come back to them later in the presentation as well. But yeah, I think that's everything. So yeah, we might move on. So just firstly, next slide's working. There we go. Just an acknowledgement of country. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connection to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. And yeah, we're very lucky. This is a beautiful artwork by Daniel Evans, an Indigenous man from Walkabout Warriors Art. And you can see here represented the land, sea and community, which is what Healthy Land and Water is all about, particularly sessions like today where we're involving a huge amount of the community across Queensland and even all across Australia, which is great to see. Just a further acknowledgement that this event is funded by the Office of the Great Barrier Reef as part of the Queensland Reef Water Quality Program. So a big thank you to them as well. So a disclaimer, so this is an enforcement and compliance webinar. I am not a lawyer myself, so just a disclaimer, the information provided in this workshop will be general in nature and should not be taken as legal advice. And we recommend that councils should refer to requirements of the Environmental Protection Act 1994, State Planning Policy 2017, our IECA Best Practice Erosion Sediment Control, and any other requirements that you might have. So just that disclaimer there. So a little bit about me. So I am fairly new to Healthy Land and Water. I'm an environmental scientist. That's my background. I've got a degree in ecology and conservation, as well as secondary teaching. And prior to assuming this role, I was an ESC and Natural Environment Compliance Officer at Brisbane City Council for about 2.5 years. So yeah, got a lot of experience there, which was fantastic. So I've issued numerous prescribed infringement notices, direction notices before those changed to the Environmental Enforcement Order, and enforcement notices under the Planning Act 2016. I've also conducted and led formal interviews. And just that last note there, I just wanted to acknowledge the limitations across councils regarding access to legal advice and dedicated ESC officers. So we were really well-resourced and lucky in Brisbane, being one of Australia's biggest councils, to have lots of those resources. But I know, there's different situations with other councils with limited resources, possibly no ESC officers. But a lot of this presentation is quite general in nature about how to carry through with a successful investigation. So it will hopefully help out everyone, but then there will be some specific things that might be more aspirational that you can look at into the future as well. So just a bit of background on Healthy Land and Water. So we are a not-for-profit organisation. We're an NRM body for Southeast Queensland. And within Southeast Queensland, we do lots of projects, so environmental restoration, agricultural programs, environment offsets, and an SEQ report card that you may have heard of. And then statewide, we've got this Water by Design program. So we're lucky to do capacity building across Queensland and reaching across Australia as well. Our website is hlw.org.au, so you can access all our free resources there and invitations to events and things like that as well. So a bit more about Water by Design. So we've been doing capacity building the program since 2005. So it is a really established program. We're funded by DETSI as well as our members. And yeah, our program includes a host of different things like training, field days, data gathering and reporting, as well as lots of guidelines and educational tools, all of which are free. And you can visit our specific website, which is waterbydesign.com.au. This is our website here. So yeah, definitely dive into those resources. You can adapt a lot of them for your own uses, but they can be a great starting point, yeah, for your councils or your industry. In terms of webinars that everyone will be able to access, we do have a music model assessment webinar. We don't, I think, have a confirmed date for this as yet, but it should be around June. So we'll definitely alert everyone once we've got that locked in. And the best way to stay in touch with us, we do have a Flow newsletter. So this newsletter only comes out about 12 times, so every month. There's no spam. It's all just related to the events and capacity building workshops we're doing. So highly recommend signing up to that. And things such as this video. So once this is uploaded to our website, we'll definitely put a link into our Flow magazine there for you as well. So obviously I'm not going to go through all our resources, but I just pulled out two key resources that really fit with compliance, what we're doing today. So we've got the erosion and sediment control decision tools for local government. So this one has more of a focus on DEA sites and more related possibly with compliance to the Planning Act 2016, but still useful for general investigations. And then we have the erosion and sediment control for small construction sites as well. So I'll just open up those. Hopefully you can see this. So just wanting to highlight some of the resources in this one. So this is for those sites above 2,500 square meters. So we've got a template here for a design certificate. So particularly if you are getting ESC plans and you want to ensure you're getting a suitably qualified person to check off on those, they would then fill out this form, which would then be kept on site with the ESC plan. So a great way to keep a record. Then we have inspection certificates. So again, if there is any follow-up from that suitably qualified person, they can fill out this inspection certificate, which again can be held on site. So this all provides an ongoing record of things to be kept. Then we have an erosion and sediment control plan checklist. So this is a really comprehensive checklist that officers can go through to review plans prior to a pre-start meeting. Yeah, it goes through all the different stages. You can make notes here. This, just to make a note that this is not to certify anything, so it's just for you to give advice back to that suitably qualified person, and then have a conversation with them to see if any modifications might be necessary prior to going through with those final approvals. So you can see that's quite a comprehensive list. So again, that can be modified for your council as well. Then we have the audit checklist here. So again, this is specifically for those larger DA sites, but could be modified or things pulled out for smaller sites as well. So really useful for your officers and to adapt that. This risk analysis, we'll be going through this today in my presentation, so we'll come back to that. A pre-start meeting checklist, again, so all free to use, and an environmental enforcement order. So obviously this is quite new since I think June last year, 2024. So if you do have any doubt, there is a template here that we've provided. This has been developed in consultation with experts. So you can pretty much just modify this, put in your information, all your evidence, elements of offence, and yeah, go from there. So really great resource. I know a lot of councils are already using this, but just wanted to highlight that for those who weren't aware of it. And just quickly, we do have this also for small construction sites. So this audit checklist can be really useful for industry on site to do themselves, or it can be modified for offices as well. So that's a great tool that can be handed out. And then I think a lot of people know us for our fact sheets as well. So at the end here are all the really visual fact sheets that can be used by officers and given to industry to really clearly demonstrate those main types of controls you might find on site and how to achieve best practice. So this is a lot more visual and engaging, so really great to use during inspections or attached to an email. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight those. So just jumping back into the presentation. All right, so a bit of the agenda for today. So we will be looking at the Environmental Protection Act 1994 as the focus for today. Obviously, there's also the Planning Act, but yeah, we just couldn't cover everything in this particular presentation. Then we'll be going over the types of enforcement pathways available to us, how to obtain evidence and how to use this to prove elements of an offence. I'll be going through a compliance example and also just highlighting what are the benefits of compliance, not only for councils, but also for industry. And then we'll have time for some questions, hopefully, as well. All right, so one of the main pieces of legislation I mentioned there we look at when assessing ESC is the Environmental Protection Act 1994, and that has three primary duties that apply to everyone in Queensland. So we've got our general environmental duty, so that is not to carry out an activity that may cause harm without taking measures to prevent or minimise that harm. We then have the duty to notify of environmental harm, so to inform relevant authorities and landowners. And then there's the duty to restore the environment. So when an incident has occurred, people do need to take measures to rehabilitate or restore that. So there's no requirement for council to instigate that. People should be aware and can do that themselves as well. So there is that general duty to restore. DETSI, I've got a lot of links from them today, so they of course have a fantastic summary of all of these. So if you do want to review those, I'll get into more specifics. There's those obligations there. They've got great PDFs that make everything quite clear. So yeah, we're looking at now that idea of environmental harm. So just briefly, so environmental harm may be caused by an activity directly or indirectly, and as a result of the activity or from the combined effects of the activity and other activities or factors. So underneath environmental harm, we have environmental nuisance as well as material and serious environmental harm. So in terms of environmental nuisance, the power to enforce that has been devolved to council, so they can take on responsibility to do compliance action under environmental nuisance, and I've got a description there. Whereas Section 16 and 17 of the EP Act is a referral to state. So if you do encounter material and serious environmental harm, that is then referred to state for them to deal with. There are a bunch of monetary values and specific criteria that determine when something is material and serious environmental harm. So again, I won't go through all of those. The good thing is that in general, most things covered under ESC and for ESC officers will come under environmental nuisance. There are cases where you might have a dual role as an EHO, environmental health officer, and in those cases you might be more likely to encounter chemical incidences and things like that that can be a serious nature. So you might be more likely to refer things to state if you're in that role. And then you might also have really sensitive places like Ramsar wetlands, very close proximity to the Great Barrier Reef. And in those cases, yeah, you might be more likely to refer something. However, yeah, it's not as common, but again, I've got a link here for DETSI, and they have a fantastic breakdown of the situations where you would do that. So yeah, you can always double check if you are unsure. And obviously, there's no harm in referring it to state. They can always say, oh no, this is not a matter that you would deal with. All right, so obviously in compliance, definitions are really important as well. So something we'll come across quite frequently in the legislation is if that something is unlawful versus willful. So something that is unlawful, so generally acts are unlawful unless authorized, justified, or excused by law. Excuse me. So a good thing with this one is that contractors on site are often really eager to let you know if something has been authorized or is justified. They'll have the documentation on site and they'll be well aware that they are able to do these actions. If there is any doubt or they can't produce those things, in those cases, that might trigger some doubt whether the act is lawful in those cases. So usually it's fairly straightforward to determine that. But I do have there section 493A of EPA 1994, and that will expand on that and have those situations that might be lawful. For example, particular conditions in a DA that are allowing them to do it, or an environmental relevant authority is allowing some type of action. But yeah, always good to double check that if you are unsure. Then moving on to willful. So willful requires proof that the person, which can also include a company, had actual intention to do a particular kind of harm or deliberately did an act aware at the time that he or she did it, that the result was a likely consequence of the act and did so regardless of risk. So willful is usually quite difficult to prove. So you need really robust evidence and follow through with your investigation practices in great detail to ensure that you are meeting all those elements to prove that something has been willful. And it does occur in situations where you have given prior education, information on legislation for a particular act, and then that act is then done again. And it really explicitly shows that they are completely aware that an activity has taken place. So yeah, you just have to be careful that you've got all your elements of your investigation to prove that. All right, so we're quite lucky in erosion and sediment control that our key legislation or key section under EPA 440ZG is the main one that we usually will only look at. So I've just put it in full here so we can go through it. So it states that a person must not, and there I've got that indication. It says person, but that does include a corporation. A person must not unlawfully deposit a prescribed water contaminant in waters, in a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage, or at a place and in a way so that the contaminant could be reasonably expected to wash, blow, fall, or otherwise move into waters, a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage. And then part B, unlawfully release stormwater runoff into waters, a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage that results in a buildup of earth in waters, a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage. So just looking at this in regards to what we were just talking about, so all of these sections can be either willful or unlawful. It's just a matter of proving what one. And then part A, section 1 and 2 there, and B, these are actions that have occurred or are occurring at the time of an inspection. Whereas part A, section 3, this is all about focus on potential for an action to occur, which is slightly different. And sometimes that can be confusing for industry because it's not as obvious. It's about if it rains, where is that sediment going to flow? So it might not be in the gutters already, but it potentially could be. So that's just a bit of an overview there. So looking at penalties, I've just got some references here as well. So when I was an officer at Brisbane City Council, a lot of this information was provided to me, but not the places that it comes from. So I always find it really useful as an officer to understand where this information is being drawn from. So I'll go through that now. So The penalty unit value in Queensland is $161.30. That's current every financial year, so from July 1st, 2024. And where they get that value for and how that value is indexed is covered under the Penalties and Sentences Act 1992, Section 5A. So that just gives an explanation of how they arrive at these numbers and, yeah, how it changes moving forward. Then we have penalty unit amounts for 440ZG, and they're found in the State Penalties Enforcement Regulation 2014, Schedule 1. So obviously that's all online, so you can just search for Schedule 1, Control F, find it, search for 440ZG, and that'll have the breakdown of those penalty unit amounts. And those penalty unit amounts will vary according to an individual or a corporation who committed the offence. And it's also broken down into land size, so whether it's small, under 1,000 square meters, or larger building sites. There'll also be information about lawful and willful acts as well, so willful having a higher value. So just a review of our officer powers and requirements as well. So there's quite a few powers that an authorized officer has under EPA. So appointment as an authorized person is by the chief executive officer, so of a council. They are the person who are appointing officers under Section 445. An authorized person requires an ID, and this must be produced to exercise powers under 449. And we'll be going through evidence later on. So a great way to record all of this information is through an audio recorder. So every time you're arriving on site, showing your ID and verbally telling the person, I'm showing you my ID for the recording. And that then has that proof. So it avoids any doubt, which is really important when we're carrying out investigations. Then we have request consent to enter a property, so an important power that's exercised regularly under 452. And if you're curious about what are the exact requirements, that's under 485. So obviously you need to meet specific requirements under legislation to have a correctly issued consent. So again, I would often advocate for reading off a script, just for those really essential pieces that are necessary for an investigation. Having a script avoids any issues. No matter how experienced you are, you might miss a certain element that is really required. You can also request a warrant under Section 456. And yeah, just a caveat there that this is a limited list, so seek any internal or legal advice to understand other powers and responsibilities relevant to your role, yeah, especially if you're doing things beyond an ESC officer. All right, so now getting into potential enforcement pathways. So I've just put together this table just to simplify things for this presentation. So I just wanted to highlight on the right-hand side here, I've got an environmental outcome column with all scenarios leading to that. So that's really just to emphasize that this is ultimately our purpose in doing environmentally sustainable development under the Environmental Protection Act. So that's why we're out there as compliance officers. And it's important that industry knows that that's why we're out there too. So I'm here to, yeah, essentially protect the environment. Then along the top, I have some pathways we can go through. So education, environmental enforcement order, and prescribed infringement notices. So you'll notice there in all scenarios, I've got education ticked. That should always be the priority, foregrounding that at all times, ensuring there's no doubt about where industry can go to get information, providing those fact sheets, really empowering them to take control of ESC on their site. So yeah, that's always first and foremost. Then we have our environmental enforcement orders. So obviously a great tool to formalize actions. So especially in those cases where we might have had experience with a particular um, contractor, sorry, and we know that they have showed resistance in doing compliance, we might go directly to an environmental enforcement order to formalize it, get those requirements in writing, get it out to them, and then they have deadlines that they must stick to, which are then enforceable. Or that we might have a great experience where we know we just have to give that education and we'll get everything rectified within 48 hours and everything will be great. And then we have our PINs as well, so prescribed infringement notices, so can be used as a deterrent, or if we are seeing an action happening at the time of an inspection and it really is justified to do a PIN, that is another avenue we have. So in all four scenarios there, yeah, we can do different mixtures of these things. So we might just do education, we might go education and environmental enforcement order and get that environmental outcome. In the example I'll give today, it is a situation where I provided education and then went straight to issuing a PIN. And this was all to do with the nature of that investigation. So there's always particularities of a certain investigation. And the timeline of that didn't warrant an environmental enforcement order in that case. And then the last one is issuing all three. At the bottom here is prosecution. So this would usually occur for serious incidents, possibly multiple offences over time, multiple different departments involved, prior history. So there's really extreme cases where that next step is required, but we won't be going into detail into prosecution today. So one of the most essential parts of an investigation is doing a desktop assessment and doing this prior to deciding on an enforcement pathway. So I'll just go through some of the essential elements to undertake here. So phoning the complainant is probably the number one. This is more for your reactive investigations where a complaint has come through. It might come through in writing. So I would initially call the complainant, clarify any information. They might have insufficient evidence, so they might be able to send through more photos, and also give you knowledge of whether it's still an ongoing issue. So the issue might have been resolved, so you can easily close that off. You're saving time, council's money, and moving on to those more important investigations. So that would be the first thing I would always do prior to going out to site. Then I've mentioned compliance history. So hopefully you have records of all your previous investigations, and that might indicate that, yeah, you have someone who has been pinned multiple times, they're not complying. So you're going to adjust what enforcement pathways you take with that particular person or company, and will really help you inform how you're going to approach your investigation. Then checking your approvals, so going through all your whether building approvals, DAs, anything else in place, and reviewing that will give you a really good indication of what to expect. So if it has a DA, it's potentially a larger site, so you might be expecting sediment basins or those larger controls. So you'll just go into it more prepared of what you might be looking for on site. Or if there are no approvals in place, and that again will be a bit of a red flag. Land size is always good to check. So again, we've got those thresholds above and below 2,500 meters squared under the planning policy, which is always good to know. And again, that indicates we might be seeing those larger controls like sediment basins when we go above 2,500 meters squares. Not necessarily, but often. Then reviewing overlays. So really important things such as waterway corridors, protected vegetation, they all might influence it, and also what type of investigation we might do. So if we have an incident in a waterway corridor overlay, we might want to take GPS coordinates to help prove that a certain issue has occurred in the place we think it is under that overlay. So just providing that more thorough and robust evidence that might be required. And of course, checking for an ESC plan. So ESC plans are a really obviously great way to assess the site, know exactly what we should be expecting when we go out there, and yeah, cross-checking that. So if you have the capacity, printing that out and taking it to you for the inspection is always a big help. And once we've done all of this, that really helps us to determine that preliminary risk level of what we might be looking at in terms of our enforcement pathway, which is what we'll look at in the next slide. All right, so we've already gone over that first one, but yeah, always reviewing your legislation. So whether you think you're looking under more EPA or the Planning Act 2016, always good to review that quickly. And then we assess the severity of non-compliance, and we can use this fantastic risk matrix, particularly for new officers as well, but also if you're just unsure, this is very valuable. So looking at along the x-axis there, we have culpability. So that goes from inadvertent through to willful. And we'll go in further on how you can assess that as well. And then on your y-axis, we have from low to a serious impact. And then depending where our points meet up, we've got voluntary self-compliance at the bottom there in green, educational action in yellow, so using our cautions or possibly a warning letter will be appropriate. Then we move up into the orange, so your formal action, so issuing that EEO, or potentially a prescribed infringement notice as well. And then when we're moving right up, we go possibly to prosecution. You might also end up in that realm of serious and material environmental harm, and that's where you would refer it to DETC, and it wouldn't be something to keep going with. So yeah, I mentioned there before, determine likelihood of compliance. So you might have knowledge that someone is less likely to do voluntary compliance or through education. And in that case, you might bump up to your formal action. So it all depends on your knowledge of an incident. I've got there determining who is liable for a breach. So that is essential. If there's any doubt in your investigation of who is the person you need to pursue, there's really no point in going through to formal action because you won't meet all the elements of the offence, which is person being one of them. And that will be a waste of time. So unfortunately, you might just have to give education to all parties, do a cleanup and accept that, yeah, no further action can be taken. And then, of course, review evidence to determine if it satisfies the elements of the offence, which I've gone over there. So DETC have provided us with this fantastic breakdown of how we might assess this x-axis and y-axis. So here we have culpability. So if we're looking at low culpability, these are those acts that are inadvertent. There was no intention, no prior compliance actions have been recorded. It's a short-term duration, something that can easily be remedied. And there's no proof that this person benefited in any way with this non-compliance. So we can go through that quick checklist. Then we move on to more moderate culpability. So these are your more careless acts. So you might have had isolated prior non-compliance with this particular person. It might be a longer duration, so occurring over a longer period of time. The person may have benefited somewhat from non-compliance. So because they do have some prior knowledge, they might be just cutting some corners. And then we have serious culpability. So this is when we move on to those willful acts. So I mentioned they might have past non-compliance involving the same issue. So they're aware of the legislation, they're aware of that issue. So yeah, it's more likely that their understanding means this is willful. But obviously, yeah, if you are going into this, you would bring up this and check each of these points before deciding if you want to go down this willful act. Um, just some other points there. So they might be motivated by profit. It involves misleading conduct and failure to notify departments effectively, um, providing notification. So yeah, quite a serious incident. Then we have from low to serious impact. So low impact being, yeah, there's no or some potential impact, no public concern. Moving on to moderate, so in the middle there in orange, that's when you might have more public scrutiny. So you might have one or two people invested in the issue, or you might have sediment on a footpath. So it's increasing the danger to the public. So your risk is increasing there. It might be a longer term or potential impact. And it's maybe moving beyond an immediately localized scale to something greater. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got serious impact. So these are permanent long-term impacts, potentially wide scale of great intensity and have high level of public concern. So this is when you might be getting into that realm of referring this to DETSI as a serious incident. So just some other important things here. So it's really good for councils, particularly to establish compliance procedures and expectations. So ensuring your officers have really clear and measurable deadlines for compliance. This doesn't have to be hard and fast. So you might have a general rule of 48 hours for a particular incident. For most incidents is a good time to get rectification. And have all officers aware of that. However, there's always officer discretion and particular scenarios like heavy rainfall expected where you might lower that. But generally, it's good to be consistent so industry has some expectation of the information they're getting from officers that they're meeting with. Keeping evidence that the alleged offender has been made aware of issues. So this is essential, as we'll look at soon in pursuing some enforcement pathways. So you need that evidence that they have been made aware, whether it's through a recording of a conversation you've had with them, whether it's in a follow-up email you've sent outlining what was discussed. Keeping that on file is really essential. And of course, ensuring the alleged offender is aware of best practice ESC guidelines and providing links and fact sheets and pointing them to the legislation that you're looking at. So really important to educate people at the same time. I have a really important tip here. So avoid being specific with advice. Place the onus on the alleged offender to access and follow best practice guidelines. So essentially as regulators, yeah, we're not there to hold industry's hand, tell them exactly what they need to do on site, because then that is then putting pressure on us to deliver something, whereas the onus is on them. They're making money from these developments. They're invested in this. They should be aware of best practice procedures and the legislation they need to act under. However, in saying that, it is council's duty to really foreground that education and make sure there's no barriers in getting that information to them. So yeah, ultimately we want to work alongside each other. But yeah, being specific will put you in danger of then getting pushback from industry as well. And then celebrating success. It was really fantastic to see yesterday. I was with Sunshine Coast and Noosa Council, and it was amazing to see how much Sunshine Coast invested into celebrating when things were really going well for certain contractors. It doesn't need to be patronizing, but yeah, everyone should be recognized when they're doing the right thing. So it's always important to foreground all correspondence with things that contractors are doing well, and being really meaningful and specific in that recognition. So saying you're great is obviously pretty meaningless. But yeah, it can really help to reinforce good practice as well as terminology, and can lead to some contractors striving for better outcomes. So just some really basic examples there. So in an email, you might say after your audit, sediment fencing installed to best practice guidelines, dug in backfilled with appropriate returns. So you're reinforcing best practice from those IECA guidelines. So then people have in their head, oh, yep, this is what I need to be doing each time. And then, yeah, a note that all the temporary downpipes were connected. They weren't flapping in the wind. So that's something great to acknowledge. So yeah, I think that's a really, really important thing that all councils should strive for. So I have a bit of a break here. I might keep moving forward, but this is something to think about, and we can go to questions at the end. But I just wanted people to start thinking about what might be some of the barriers to moving beyond education pathways. So we looked at why education is so important, but there are the instances where we really need to start enforcing compliance with those alternative pathways. But yeah, you might be struggling to get to that point, and just thinking about what those reasons might be. And then there are some obviously councils who have overcome these barriers. So they are doing the education, they're getting the enforcement orders out there, and they are issuing PINs when it is necessary. And what is the process they've gone to reach that point? So I think it would be really valuable to hear from anyone who is here at the end of the session, yeah, how you got there. And in the absence of anyone speaking, I think I might, hopefully Sunshine Coast is here because they have achieved overcoming those barriers and are doing all three really well. So I might call on them later to provide a bit of insight into that. All right, so now we're moving on to those more meaty issues of, yeah, how we do these thorough investigations in order to successfully issue an environmental enforcement order or a prescribed infringement notice. So our ultimate goal here on the right-hand side is to prove an offence beyond a reasonable doubt. So we have to be able to do that. The way we get there is through evidence. So evidence can be lots of things: photos, recordings, interviews under caution, contemporaneous notes, and many more things. All that evidence is then going into proving our elements of offence. So establishing the time and date, the location that it occurred, that person, which is really essential, and the offence legislation. So specifically looking at 440ZG and how we're satisfying that particular piece as well. So we'll break that down further in later slides. So yeah, all this needs to come together. If there's doubt on any of those, yeah, there's no point in pursuing these other pathways. So breaking down evidence a bit further. So photos are absolutely essential, and I should include video here as well. So it's essential that they're clear and they provide sufficient context. So I remember as an officer receiving sometimes from different departments or different officers photos that would just have dirt on a road with a concrete background. And yeah, it has no meaning without a wider context of the environment we're looking at with the close-up. It's not going to be useful in an investigation. So capturing that context with, if we have street names in the photos, house numbers, anything that is recognizable that this is our location. Then we want, yeah, the wide shots and close-ups of controls, so both together. We can also rule out other offenders really well with photos. So I'll show it in my investigation example, always capturing any upstream photos. So are there any builders working upstream who may be potentially contributing to an issue? If we can take photos that rule out any other offenders, that will make our investigation a lot smoother. And of course, occupier and builder information. particularly if the site is not occupied, finding those signs, getting those QBC license numbers, as much information as we can obtain on site. Because you do have the case where they haven't put any information, unfortunately, and if they're yeah, that can cause an issue and prolong our investigation, or if we forget. Then we have recordings. So at Brisbane City Council, we recorded every investigation, and I think it is a really important thing to do for all councils if you're not already doing it. And those recordings should look at capturing the following. So the time, date, location, a job reference relevant to the job, the reason for the inspection, what type of site is it? So is there a DA approval? Is there a building approval? What are we looking at? Possibly the land size if you know it. And one of my mentors at Brisbane City Council always would tell me narrate as you go, which I think was, yeah, a fantastic piece of advice. So as soon as you're stepping out of that car, painting a picture or a story of the investigation. So approaching site, have identified sediment within the roadside gutter at the frontage of site, which matches sediment on site. Sediment fencing is along the frontage with correct returns. So yeah, pretty much, yeah, giving a story of what you're looking at. And that will then work in tandem with the photos you've collected. Another really important thing for recordings is it captures whether you've given a correct caution or consent to enter. So especially if you're doing a caution, you need to give that right to silence and other information that's essential to making evidence admissible. If investigation team or lawyer is reviewing that recording and they've noticed you've given something incorrect, it might be a stumbling block in your investigation and stop you from moving forward. Or you might need to then re-interview or redo an inspection. But yeah, again, I would recommend having a script on your phone or on a device that you can just read off for every inspection to ensure it's been given correctly. Yeah, there were several investigations that got flagged during my time that, yeah, couldn't move forward because that was given incorrectly. Just one point on evidence, and this is something sometimes contractors have brought up or can be a point of contention. This is related to Queensland. I know it's different in other states, but just looking at Section 43 of the Invasion of Privacy Act 1971. So it states that the use of a listening device to overhear, record, monitor, or listen to a private conversation is an offence. However, it is not an offence to use a listening device to record a conversation where the person using the listening device is a party to the private conversation, which is essentially what is happening when you as an officer are interviewing or speaking with someone on site. So the officer may record any conversation with another person that they're directly participating with. And an alleged offender or other party does not need to be made aware that the conversation is being recorded and the recording can be submitted as evidence in court. However, I think best practice or the best way to go about it generally is I would always make people aware that it is being recorded. However, there may be a scenario where this does come up. So I thought I'd just put that in there as some additional information. All right, so on to contemporaneous notes and documents. So our site audit, they can be handwritten, but is commonly done by apps now. So there's iAuditor and Survey 123, or possibly an editable PDF that you can use. So that becomes your contemporaneous notes. Other documents that can be really important in an investigation are your legal documents, like your ASIC searches to determine directors of companies, title searches to find out who is the property owner. You might use rainfall data in an interim period between compliance. There might be a large amount of rain. Near maps is fantastic. Obviously, it's not updated maybe every 3 months, I think, but can be really useful in long-term investigations and just looking at the general site geography. Of course, we'll use overlays, ESD plans, and then keeping a record of all those emails and witness statements are important. Uh, Onto interviews. So again, they can be a really useful tool. If an offence has been identified, you should be providing a caution prior to speaking with someone, or providing that caution as soon as you think of it. So you can provide it afterwards, but you want to provide it as close to when you've identified it as possible. And once you've provided that caution, it's important to capture names of persons, phones, emails, their role on site, if they're part of an organization, outlining what the alleged offence is as part of that caution, establishing how long people have been occupying site, and who has been occupying site, and any additional details surrounding the non-compliance. So that can be a really powerful way to quickly gather a lot of evidence for an investigation. So after that, another really important part, you might have done all this great work, but if you're not storing and recording the evidence appropriately, it can often slow down your investigation or stop an investigation going through. So it's important that all evidence is uploaded to a secure system, like a council system you might have. Ensuring files are consistently named and logical. So you never know who might be picking up your investigation. You might go on leave. You might have a lawyer who wants to have a look at it. So yeah, it just needs to be really clear and logical in what to look for. And any person should be able to pick it up and understand what's occurred through your notes and through your photos. A lawyer may also need to write a summary based on your investigation, and they might not have you next to them, so that the more they can do independently to do that review, the better. So I would also recommend establishing any templates or possible basic conventions on how you want to record information as a council or an organisation to ensure that is a smooth process. All right, so we've got all of that evidence. So everything's been recorded really well, and then we can use all of this to satisfy these elements of an offence. So there's not too many for 440 ZG, so we'll go through these. So you've got the time and the date. So if an occupier has been made aware of a deposit and not rectified the issue in a reasonable timeframe set, the offence date and time is when that re-inspection takes place. So you've given the 48 hours, you're re-inspecting, still non-compliant. That is what you would put in your evidence on your EEO or on your prescribed infringement notice notes. And if you observe a direct deposit, there's no obligation to make that person, or you can't make them aware prior, but the date or time is when you're seeing that offence occur, so at that time. So the potential evidence you can use to prove the time and date are your recording, so you're saying that into the microphone, you've got photo timestamps, and you've got your contemporaneous notes where you've indicated that as well. Your place, so that's generally quite straightforward to identify. So that's through your photos, recordings. You might have a title search to say the specific lot, and you might use satellite imagery to highlight that as well. So person, we've been going on about this. It can be one of those more challenging ones. So yeah, I've got the challenge of determining liability there. So obviously, construction practices can be really complex. You might have 20 people on site, all representing different subcontractors, the primary contractor. So it can be hard to determine who has made a deposit, and often we can't determine that. The way we get around that is through the occupier's liability. So this is under 440 ZE. So the occupier, so the person who has been engaged to do the works on site under the BA or the DA, who is project managing, who is hiring those subcontractors, that person is liable if they fail to act after being made aware of an unlawful deposit, such as contaminants under the legislation. And then this help avoids that confusion if there are multiple trades. So if that subcontractor has done the act, you warn the primary contractor on that first inspection, then you give your deadline of 48 hours or whatever, and then you come back and it's still there, that then your person will become the primary occupier. So that is how you can avoid some of that confusion. So just an enforcement approach there. So before issuing, a prescribed infringement notice, you will need to determine who committed that deposit or release, who is responsible for the site, and when did they become aware of the issue. So that's when it's really important to have that recording evidence or an email chain where they've acknowledged that they've been given that prior knowledge. All right, and now we need to satisfy the elements of the particular legislation. So under 440ZG, we have unlawfully deposit a prescribed water contaminant. So have you satisfied all those particular elements? So we looked at whether an act is unlawful. So it's unlawful unless it's authorized under that section 493A. So again, we can just cross-check that list, ask if they can provide any evidence that it is a lawful act, and if not, we can use our elements, such as our evidence of photos, that it is an unlawful act. It's also important to find deposit. So thankfully, that meaning of deposit is clearly outlined in 440ZE, Part 3C. So just go through there, double check. Obviously, you'll learn this over time, but particularly for new officers, it's good to review that alongside with the team leader. And a prescribed water contaminant. So yeah, I never knew where this list came from as an officer, not for a long time, but it comes from the Environmental Protection Regulation 2019, Schedule 10. So that has that quite long, detailed list of what a prescribed water contaminant is. It can be really useful to communicate that with industry on site because they might not be aware that even something like vegetation could potentially be a prescribed water contaminant. Then we have our 3 parts. So these parts aren't essential to break down as much, but you will need to prove these through your evidence as well. So in waters, you would have your evidence through photos and things such as this, or overlays. And waters does have a definition under the Environmental Protection Policy 2019, and Schedule 1 and 2 lists all those water bodies and what they are. So you can use those state overlays to determine them. In a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage, it's fairly self-explanatory. So again, using photos to determine that, or even overlays of stormwater infrastructure might be helpful. And at a place and in a way so that the contaminant could be reasonably expected to wash, blow, fall, or otherwise move into waters, a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage. Some important evidence here could be things such as contour mapping, getting really clear photos from different angles, which help visually show that the site is sloping towards the roadway. That sometimes you might need some additional evidence to help prove that, and also proximity to a roadway. So your site, exposed earth might be set back so far that it's not reasonable that that contaminant could move into these areas. And then B as well, some unlawfully released stormwater runoff into waters, a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage that results in buildup of earth in waters, a roadside gutter or stormwater drainage. This is one, I'm not sure if I ever issued a PIN under this particular part of the Act, but some people here might have experience where they have. But again, you'll need to prove that through your evidence. So essentially, if you have got all evidence that proves each of those elements, you would, write that out in a document. and ensure everything is ticked off before considering issuing a PIN. All right, so now on to an investigation. So hopefully I've given a general overview of how you undertake an investigation. So this is a particular site I investigated as an officer. Obviously, it's been de-identified, so there's no privacy issues with this. So this was a non-compliance on a site less than 2,500 meters squared. I received an initial complaint, so it was a reactive investigation, and the complaint was received on the 4th of January 2024. Photos supplied by the complainant showed non-compliance, no ESC controls, sediment on the roadway. So my immediate first action was to conduct that desktop assessment. So I called the complainant to verify if the issue was still occurring, which it was. I checked approvals. It was a building approval site. And I did a search of council records, which indicated previous compliance history for the same project. So thankfully, the person who did that investigation had email evidence, a recording with the director of the company. They had their contemporaneous notes through their audit. And I could see that a warning letter and education has been supplied to this director as well. So already starting to gather some of that idea of my enforcement pathway. So what I've got here is my risk analysis. So I'm considering that education has already been received by this AO, so they're somewhat aware of what is best practice and what they should be doing. The evidence collected by the complainant was clear and showed non-compliance, so their evidence was suitable enough for me to accept it. So looking at the impact, so it was a transient impact. So this was potential of sediment to go into a roadside gutter, and some sediment already was in the gutter as well. It was localized to this particular lot, and there was a low or medium level of public concern. So I think there was initially just one complainant observing this issue. So I've put that as a fairly minor impact. And then in terms of culpability, so there is that previous non-compliance, so they are somewhat aware of the impacts. So moving that up in the scale to a more careless incident in this case. So at this point, I made a phone call to the director, and because I've already established that there is non-compliance through the evidence that had been collected, I issued them a caution before discussing that non-compliance. And under that caution, I confirmed that the alleged offender was still the primary occupier of the site, and confirmed with them the dates that they assumed control of the site, and that at the time of the evidence, they were still the primary occupier. I confirmed that previous compliance issues had been observed at the site, and confirmed that he had received the education, including that warning letter. So at this point, it was a fairly rainy period as well. It was nothing dramatic, but there was some light rain predicted. So I advised of a 48-hour deadline for rectification, and emailed him with a summary of our conversation, and those photos that had been provided. And I kept all of that on file. So that phone call was recorded, the email chain was saved and put onto our system. So on my inspection follow-up on the 6th of Jan, so 2 days later, the site was not occupied. I completed my site audit, and I unfortunately found that the condition had not improved. So I took my recordings, my photos, and the audit of that reinspection, and I commenced with my follow-up phone call to the director. So an additional caution was provided. I advised that rectifications were still not completed. However, the AO assured that compliance would be achieved the following day. So in this case, I advised that an EEO would be issued if the second deadline passed, so the following day. and that a formal interview would be requested, considering the history. So we're kind of gathering momentum as things are not progressing as how we thought they would in terms of education. So these are some photos. So unfortunately, I only have photos of this re-inspection. I didn't have the initial photos. But the condition of the initial photos were almost identical as these. So this was from the 6th of January. So in terms of looking at the evidence I mentioned, so I've got here a more contextual shot, so a more wide-angle shot of the entrance to the site. It shows that the safety fencing's in disarray. Potentially there had been an entry pad at some point. You can see the contours are sloping towards the roadway. And you can also see that the type of sediment on site matches the sediment in the gutter as well. So it's the same consistencies and color. And then I followed that up with a more close-up photo as well. And then you can see I blocked out the builder information, but taking photos of that as well. I put this photo here on the left-hand side for a reason. So this is a good photo imagining if this was the only photo we have. Obviously, it's essentially useless. It doesn't have additional context. But another important thing for this photo is that particular sediment doesn't really match anything that I saw on site. So this is evidence that I guess would be more inadmissible, or we wouldn't include it because this may have been dropped by someone else. We don't know where this particular, it looks more like soil has come from. And then a close-up photo is always important of that builder information. Then taking more context photos, so looking downstream and upstream, so getting a more idea of that geography. So this sloping roadway, and again, lack of that entry point there, no sediment fencing or other controls in place. And in terms of talking about ruling out other offenders, so this was quite a long street, so I walked up the street and ensured I took photos as I went to show that no other construction was occurring here. To successfully rule out that someone else has contributed to this issue. And that's just another photo there. One thing, and I'm not sure, I imagine this was captured in my initial investigation, but I didn't have it. A thing that is missing is the gully pit. So I would always want to include a picture of the stormwater gully pit downstream of this incident. Potentially you could use overlays showing where that gully pit is through the council infrastructure overlay. However, it would always be good to have that photo that's matching it as well to show that this sediment is flowing down towards that gully pit 10 or 15 meters downstream. So the next day was that final deadline before I was going to issue that environmental enforcement order. However, this contractor did provide clear photos showing compliance. All the sediment had been cleaned up. The controls were installed to best practice, including an entry pad, sediment fence, and gutter protection. So they had finally done their due diligence and fixed up the site. However, it was then important to go back and look at the overall investigation. So I've got this prior compliance history, this education that's been received. There were multiple chances for this director to comply and this company to comply. Over that time, there was increased concern from neighbours. So I think I had another neighbour call me up at that point. I was aware that all my elements of the offence were clear. I'd established the person, the time, date, that it was an unlawful act, that it was a deposit, and it was a prescribed water contaminant, being earth from site. I'd ruled out other alleged offenders. The time frame ruled out the need for an EEO. That's just a point there. And the investigation was also occurring during a rainy period. So during that 48-hour period, there was the potential for rain to exacerbate the impact of that particular site as well. And in this case, education had not been a deterrent. So I determined that a pin was a successful and justifiable deterrent in this case. And that's reflected in this risk assessment. So you've got my first one there. So obviously this re-inspection, they'd have even more additional information. So the scale towards willful increased, and the impact, because the duration had been extended, had increased slightly, and with those rain events. So I moved into justifying that more formal action approach. So as you can see, it does take a lot to get to that point where you are issuing a PIN. In most cases, yeah, education will be the best way. It's the best way to develop relationships with contractors, get them on side. But yeah, there are situations where these things are necessary. And also, this is just an additional thing I had the capacity to do. So I conducted a formal interview prior to issuing my PIN as well. So in this case, this was a common practice we were able to do at Brisbane City Council. So I invited the director to attend this, gave him a certain period of time to reply. And during that interview, yeah, I gave him his rights again, established all those elements of the offence and provided that, gave him an opportunity to defend those actions formally and respond to the evidence, ruled out any other defences through questioning, and got an admission to support the breach under EPA 1994. And also provided an investigation timeline to make that explicit as well. So essentially all the work was probably done in previous interactions and phone calls I'd had with this alleged offender. However, having the resources to do this formal interview just really foregrounded giving that natural justice and having that thorough investigation. So yeah, just highlighting here that this fits in more so with scenario 3. So where I've gone from education through to a PIN based on the history that I had on file. And ultimately, obviously, we did get an environmental outcome. And thankfully, there was no appeal on this PIN, I think because, yeah, the evidence was really robust, and I'd had multiple conversations with that director. All right, so almost wrapping up here. Sorry, yeah, I'm not used to talking this much to a screen, but hopefully everyone's gotten something out of this presentation so far. So just looking at some benefits of an ESC compliance program. So operational costs of running a program can be partially or fully offset by a number of reasons. So this was actually a paper that Health Water by Design completed. I believe it's on our website as well, where they investigated some of the benefits of why an ESC compliance program should be implemented. So the first point there is revenue generated through infringement notices. So we've talked at length about the fact that the ultimate aim is an environmental outcome. However, there will always be instances where PINs are necessary and they do provide some type of revenue. Then you've got the bigger one, so savings in council expenditure. So these are more indirect, but you'll have lower maintenance costs for your waterways, open drains, and stormwaters by having a robust compliance system in place and all these officers who are visible and who are interacting with contractors. You are going to see a massive reduction in sediment and then in maintenance of all of these council infrastructure. So yeah, things like street sweeping, aquatic weed management, whether you've got eutrophication, so increase in nutrients from these flows off site. You'll also get a decrease in public complaints. So as over time, as your people in your LGA become more educated, yeah, public complaints, they may increase or may decrease, so that's a bit of a catch-22 as people become more knowledgeable. And yeah, you'll get minimized nuisance for flooding risks, which is a great thing. So again, you'll block stormwater drains. And of course that, yeah, eutrophication of waterways from these flows can lead to algal blooms. Turbid water can kill fish and yeah, lead to construction disruptions. There can also be economic gains for agriculture, commercial and recreational fishing, tourism, property value preservation. So amenity is a big one, having nice, tidy sites around your LGA just increase the whole appeal of an area. And yeah, there's social benefits, again, for improved recreational and health. So less dust complaints, things like that. And also enhance council reputation for environmental stewardship. So yeah, it's always great that council's visible out there and addressing these issues. And that's not to say there is also no benefit to industry as well. So being ESC compliant can help reduce cleanup costs. So when you do have all of these correct things installed, things like sediment fencing, basins, dirty water diversion drains, every time you have a rain event, these controls are helping mitigate all those issues. Whereas if you have nothing, your slabs might get covered in sediment, areas need to be dug out, stormwater drains that haven't been connected might fill up with mud. They then need to be cleaned out before they're connected. So there's a whole host of cleanup costs that are avoided with correct installation of these controls. That then obviously leads on to less delays, regulatory enforcement costs, so avoiding any of those pins or litigation that you might face by having correct compliance in place. Third-party damages and compensation. So we found at council a lot of civil disputes, so sediment flowing between private boundaries, and that can be a real headache for industry dealing with the angry neighbors who need things sorted out by them. And then obviously saving staff a whole bunch of resource time. And then the last point there, reputational damage to both persons and company brands. So people will notice every site is branded. It has the name of who you are on the safety fencing. And if people see a site in absolute disarray, yeah, that's not a good look. Whereas if they see a nice manicured sediment fences, it looks great. That reflects probably how that brand approaches their construction as well. All right, so yes, sorry, that was a lot of talking there. But yeah, hopefully you got a bit out of it. I'm just going back to my screen. So I just want to see if there are any questions here. Just having a look. Nat, you might know more questions that came through than I did.
Yeah, it's mainly these ones. Someone asked about some more resources aside from just the what have I designed fact sheets? Any industry bodies that have other resources that you can recommend?
Okay, yeah. So I know obviously one that IECA have a bunch of resources, and that's not so much Queensland specific, so that is nationwide. But I think a lot of people are aware of those. But yeah, they have the White Book, which I'm sure everyone's aware of, has a great breakdown of all of those things. In terms of other ones, I can't think of off the top of my head at the moment, but I'll follow that up and then email through any resources I can think of. So yeah, we can definitely follow that up at a later time. And I'm sure other states probably have some great resources that they can put in the chat maybe that I'm not aware of as well.
Yep, just another question as well in the chat from Cal. If you believe that an offence has occurred, do you still require consent to enter a property?
Yes, I think now this is where I don't want anyone to quote me. I think there are situations that do allow you to. Again, I'd have to get advice on what that particular scenario is, but I think there are some cases. But in most circumstances, if the site, yeah, is occupied, you want to definitely get consent to enter first.
So
Yeah.
maybe that's one that you can put a bit more detail in the follow-up email afterwards.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
More
Uh,
information.
And yeah, I think there are certain emergency situations, yeah, where those type of things can take place. Yeah.
And will you be sharing the slides with everyone after the event as well?
I'm not sure about sharing of the slides. The whole presentation will be uploaded as a video, but I think we should be able to share the slides as well. That should be possible.
Yeah, we can try get that organized.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, before I forget, I'm not sure if Michelle from Sunshine Coast is still here. I did mention her. Yeah, I had the privilege of going out there, and they do have a fantastic program that they've developed. Yeah, Michelle, if you're here, if you were confident or happy to give a bit of a overview of what you're doing there, that would be great. Sorry to put you on the spot. She might not be here. No, that's all
Michelle,
right.
I've unmuted you if you are there. You're welcome to chat.
That's all right. If she's not there, I can give a bit of a rundown.
Oh,
Can
I
you
think
hear me
she's
now?
here. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi. Hi,
Thanks,
Sam.
Michelle.
Hi. So at Sunshine Coast, the program has been going on for just over 3 years now. So we started off mainly concentrating on the educational side of things, really engaging with both the building industry and the development industry, educating, making sure our website was up to date, fact sheets, videos in collaboration with Health and Land and Water. Once we had that educational side and they knew what their expectations were, we then moved on to sort of more proactive inspections as well as the reactive inspections as well. So we've got two and a half officers that are within the team. And then based on that, we also make sure that we attend all pre-starts, and there's conditions within the development approval requiring that before a pre-start can take place, they need to have a ESE plan and ESE design certificate. So that's for OPW sites. And then if they haven't got those in place, a pre-start can't take place. So at least we've got that benchmark to start with. And then during the pre-start meeting, that is classed as their first warning. So we lay our expectations at that meeting. So they know that if they don't comply, they will be getting those pins, but also make us more approachable to say, look, we're here to work with you. We're here to work with the industry. Any issues, get in contact with us, and we'll try and help. We'd rather hear from them if there's an issue than hear from somebody else. And that works really well. And by also doing the proactive inspections, we've now got really good feedback from the industry and good relationships that we've built up. So now when we walk on site, mostly unannounced, they're normally quite happy to see us and actually want to showcase what they're doing and how they've improved their ESD measures, which is really good. So we're finding the compliance has improved dramatically since the start of the program. We did a benchmarking exercise right at the beginning, and it's really really come on with how many sites are now complying, and they're actually coming to us like what we ask them to do with issues, and if something happens, like if there's a blowout, they'll contact us and say, look, this has happened, and we're like, okay, that's good to know, and then we work with them rather than just issuing them with a pin if we go onto site and actually find this has happened and they haven't contacted us. So yeah, so it's really positive.
Awesome. Thanks,
Is
Michelle.
is
Yeah, it
that what
was
you
amazing.
wanted, Sam?
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Yeah, it was just so good to see how a compliance program could be such a positive experience. So yeah, the way those contractors were interacting with Michelle, you could tell that they had developed yeah, a really good relationship, um, and that they knew she was approachable and was on their side to provide that education. However, they also knew that if they did the wrong thing, that there was the potential for those other enforcement pathways. So that was not a surprise to them. So it was just really great to see, yeah, how they built up that program so successfully. So yeah, thanks, Michelle. That's great.
Thank you.
I've just seen here, oh yeah, uh, Gautam has put in creeks and catchments. Yeah, they're a really fantastic resource. They've got heaps of fact sheets and go really specific into certain controls that you can look at. So yeah, definitely check those out in the chat. Just having a look. Can you please explain how recorded conversation in a bit more detail is considered not an offence? Sorry, Nicole, if you're there, could you just explain that a bit further if you want to come on mic?
Sorry, I'm just unmuting her.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome to speak now, Nicole. You just have to unmute yourself.
All right, it's just worked. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, perfect.
Yes, perfect. Awesome. Sorry, I did take a screenshot of this one, and I just want to get my facts right on this one. It states it is not an offence to a listen device to record to use a listening device to record a conversation where the person using the listening device is a party to the private conversation. But then it also goes down to an alleged offender or another party does not need to be made aware of the conversation being recorded. So how does a device become a party where it's not announced in the conversation?
So essentially, yeah, you're a party of a conversation if that is a conversation between you as the officer with the recording device and the person you're speaking to. So if it's just those two people or a third party who's involved or someone else is interacting, that essentially makes it legal. However, if you had two external people and then the person with the recorder on the outside of that conversation, and they're not actively involved in that conversation, that is when it's illegal, if that makes sense, or inadmissible evidence. You can't use it. So you need to be essentially actively having a conversation, if that makes sense.
And with the alleged offender only, is that, or alleged, or potentially alleged?
Yes, yeah.
Yes,
Or
yes.
yeah, the person you're wanting that information from. Yeah. So
Yep,
as long
okay.
as they're speaking with you and they're aware that they're in a conversation with you, that is when, yeah, you don't have to. But yeah, as I said, there would be not many scenarios where that would be necessary. It's usually best to make everyone aware you are recording. But yeah, it's just one of those weird things in the legislation I wanted to highlight.
No, thank you. Thank you for clearing that one up.
No worries. Anything else? Section. No, I think we've gone through everything. Yeah, if there's anything else before we go, we've pretty much at time, so we're at 11:30. But please, yeah, email through any questions you might have to me. I'll try look at some of those other things that were brought up to do with other fact sheets or from other experts that might have good resources, I'll send those through. But yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and hopefully, yeah, we can maybe do another session that focuses more on the Planning Act in the future. But really appreciate everyone's interest in this, and yeah, good luck with carrying out compliance. Thanks everyone.